Hello guys, do you know what is AWS Lambda function? In this video, we will learn about the AWS Lambda function. We will be creating the AWS Lambda function in C# using the Visual Studio, and then we will deploy that Lambda function into AWS. So before we start, if you are new to this channel, please subscribe my channel. It will be a great help to me. Anyways, let's start this video. So before knowing about AWS Lambda, we need to know what is serverless. So in simple language, serverless is a cloud-based service where you can run your application and services without worrying about the underlying services. So the cloud services will actually take care of server where your application will run, and you don't need to worry about your backup, like scaling or infrastructure. The cloud service will take care of it. And now when it comes to AWS Lambda function, it's a serverless computing service in AWS. And the AWS Lambda function is mainly to perform a small tasks like processing data, sending email, or responding to any events. So in this video, we will be creating the Lambda function to perform a simple data processing. So if you look at this diagram, you will see what we'll be doing today. So we'll be first creating the Lambda function, and we will also be creating a S3 bucket. And what we will do is whenever any file is uploaded into the S3 bucket, this will trigger this Lambda function, and the Lambda function will read this file which is uploaded in the S3 bucket, and it will just write the log in the CloudWatch about the content in this data. Like if you are uploading any file which has some content, it will write the logs in these CloudWatch logs. So I'm using Visual Studio 2022. So if you go here, you can see I'm using 2022. And before we do anything, we need to install first extension and search for AWS. And you will see this AWS toolkit for Visual Studio. So you can see this green tick mark, which means this extension is already installed in my Visual Studio. But if in your case it's not installed, you need to first install it. And this extension will help you to provide you all the templates that you will require to build the Lambda function. And it's a very helpful extension tool. So once you install that extension, when you create a file and new project, what you will get is you will get this project template. So you can see this all like AWS template. So from here, since we are building the Lambda function, so we'll be using this AWS Lambda project, which will be built in a .NET Core C#. So we'll be using this one as a template, as a to build this Lambda function. So go next, and let's give a name. So maybe I'll, for the path, I will put it in Drive, learn with Sanz. Let's browse. Okay, let's use that folder, and let's say read s3 pocket data function. You can name it anything, but for this project I'll use that name. Let's create, and when you create, you will get this AWS blueprint. So you can see there are a list of blueprint. So this blueprint is actually give you the starting point. So as I discussed, we'll be using the S3 bucket where the document will be uploaded and it will trigger the Lambda function. So considering this diagram, the requirement, what I will do is I will choose I'll choose this one, this template, a project for responding to S3 event notification. Since we are dealing with the S3 bucket, so I'll choose this one and then click finish. So now if you look at this project, you have this readme file this function CS, and this configuration duration. So starting with this configuration, so this is the configuration for your Lambda function where you will be defining the profile, region. So when you say profile, it's the AWS profile. So if you are using AWS, you may have a default profile or you may have a multiple profile. So we will not discuss more on the profile, but for this Lambda function, I'm using my AWS profile, my Ariana, and it's in the region AP Southeast 2. Configuration is release, and this one is I'm using the .NET Core, so .NET 6, and for memory size by default it's giving 256, and function timeout 30, and handler is the starting point. So if you look at the function, you will see this name function handler. So that's the one. You can always change that one if you want, but we won't do that here. And the next thing is the function. So this will be our main class where we will be handling the tasks. So by default, when we use the blueprint, it gives us the starting template for us. And if you look at the dependencies and packages, you can see since we are using S3, it has also installed this Amazon Lambda S3 event. But if you go with the like empty template, you will only have this Lambda serialization and this Lambda core. But since you are using S3, like the blueprint, using the blueprint template, it's decided that we also need these two packages to build S3. So it has installed these two for us. Now, the next thing. So if you click the readme, you can see, you can go through this document to read about the Lambda, what this Lambda tool is about. But in short, this Lambda tool, you can see over here, the mock Lambda test tool. This is basically to simulate the Lambda function in your local environment. So at this point in your AWS, you don't have the Lambda function. So with using this Lambda test tool, you can actually simulate or mock, okay, what does Lambda function will do. As a developer, you can just debug, the things that will be happening within this function. And once you have that control, it will be very easy for you to debug and build the application. So let's demonstrate that. So when you click this play button, what it will does, it will open the browser, and so in the command line it will run that command, and it will run localhost 5050 in the port 5050. You can see it's a .NET Core Lambda test tool, where in the function you can see the function handler. Config is the same one where I mentioned this is the configuration. Yes, the handler is this one. You can change that one, and all those information are coming reading from this file. Now, what does this Lambda test tool do? So basically, let's say that as per our application, when there is any event happen, for example, if you drop any file, then will actually trigger one S3 event, and this S3 event, when you execute function, will then trigger this Lambda function. So we can simulate that by just pressing the execute function, and let's see what will happen so that you'll have a better idea what I'm talking about. So when you click execute function, I'm getting some error. So let's put a debug point here first. So go to the Visual Studio and put some breakpoint, stop, and let's click it. And now if you select the history function and let's execute, you'll see this debugging point. Press F10, and this will give you the records. And in the record there are some data coming through, so we are more interested in reading the S3 event, because this is where we are reading the bucket name and the file. So by default, like when you select, it will give you an example like, okay, there is a file called happy face and it's reading from the bucket source bucket, right? So currently we don't have this bucket name and like that file happy face. So what will happen is it basically, I think, will throw the error. See, it's throwing the exception, right? Because I don't think that because that bucket and that file is not exist. So what we need to first do is we need to first create this S3 bucket in the AWS, and we need to upload any file. So once we have that file and the bucket, then this won't throw the exception. So let's first do it so that we have little bit more understanding of what the Lambda is doing and what Lambda can do. So let's stop this function and let's go to console. So I'm logging with my AWS account. So I'm using my profile, my Ariana, which you can also see over here. Over here. So I'm using the same profile. And the beauty of using the profile is when you use the profile, you don't need to provide your, like access key and security when you're connecting with the, like your AWS services. Because behind the scene, what is happening is if you go to your user path, like in my case, it will be um, in my case, I'll show. So in my case, if I go to this, like path, you will see there are two files, config and credential, right? So when you open this config file, in you will see in config, you will see by default it has a region AP Southeast 2, and we also have the credential one, right? So the credential one will have some details about your profile. So at the moment you can see there are two profiles. One is a default profile and one is a My Ariana, and you can see the region is AP Southeast, and there is an access key and a secret access key. So by default I'm just this is a dummy data, because it's a like it's a crucial data which you cannot share with anyone. So I'm just putting the dummy data. But if you go and check the like your real file, you'll see the real access key and secret access key. And it's not a good idea to like use that key in your code. So it's a good practice to use the profile instead of just like hard coding or already using this key in your code. So in your cases, depending upon your profile, you may have multiple profile or just the default one. So now if we go back to Visual Studio, let's go back to the browser so that we can create a S3 bucket. So to demonstrate, what we will do is first let's create a S3 bucket. I don't have any at the moment, so let's create only one. Create, and let's say Sanz S3 bucket. And on receive, let's keep it disable, block all of this. Okay, for a moment let's leave all settings as it is and let's create a bucket. Now this will create the Sanz S3 bucket, and the next thing we need is the file so that we can read that file, right? So what we will do is let's create a file, and let's go to D drive and done with Sanz. Okay, I have these two files. Maybe I'll just upload one file from here. This is Sanz. Upload. And let's see what we have in Sanz. So if you open this file, we only have a text hello world. Okay, right. Now we have the S3 bucket with a file. Now when we debug it again, let's see what will happen. Now when you create, it will again create this input. So since in our case we don't need this all those information, what we only care about is the bucket name and the key. So what we can do is we can simply use this. So let's put the bucket name that we have created, which is Sanz bucket, right? And the file name we have uploaded is Sanz.txt, right? So when you now execute function, it will hit the breakpoint, and if you click F10, it will read the records. In our case, there is only one record, right? And within that record, we will be reading this S3 one, which is not null. And now we have this bucket in AWS Sanz S3 bucket, and we also have this key Sanz here. So in this case, we should not be getting any error. Let's see. See, it is not throwing any exception. And now using this context logger, we can log the innovating in the CloudWatch. So content line is then explain. So go here, and so if you now we look at here, we can see in the log output, this is the log that we use in text at plain, right? So our goal is to read that file. And so what we can do is now we need to modify this function, because our function is to read the file. So yes, S3 client get object metadata. This is the AWS one. If you press F12, you will see it's coming from this AWS SDK, Amazon.S3, and this one is basically for reading the metadata. But in our case, we need to read the file itself so that we can read the content in the file. So instead of using get object data, what we will use, we will use the get object asynchronously, and it will actually ask me the request. I think the bucket name key, and you can also use this one. So we'll go with this one. So for that, we need to first create a request. So what we will do is we'll first create a request, request, and create new get object request, and let's press Control Tab, use Amazon SQL model, and over here I think you can write the bucket. Sorry, bucket name. This will be like this will be coming from here, so we can say x3 event dot bucket 3. Good. This one, not that one. X3 event dot bucket dot name, and this will give you the bucket name, and we need the file name. So the key will be like event again, and object and key, and this will be like the file name. And then with this one, and we will pass this as a parameter so that it will call this function, right? So now with this one, what we can do is we will now have a response but we need to read the file. So what we can do is, let's say using string and response string equal to response dot response frame. Let's also put it using over here, and right, and let's put something. Okay. From here we can get response stream, and now we need a reader so that we can read it. So using stream reader, as a reader we'll use new stream reader, and over here we need a string which will be response stream, and let's format it, and let's say string content, and we can, what we do is we can use a reader and a read to end to read the content. We don't need to read it, so this one, and this will read the content. We can just press F9 so that we can debug, and once we have this content, what we can do is we can write here. Let's say what we will write first is, let's say we will write some data like this is s3 file, and let's say it's the request.p. This will give you the file name, and below is content, and for content again, for content we will just press content. Alright, and let's leave everything as it is. Now what it will does is, when you debug it, like it will try to read this file from the bucket that we have created and the file that we have added in the bucket. So hopefully it should work. So let's debug it, and this will again open this browser window. And one thing you have noticed that every time when I stop and run, it will try to launch the new browser every time, which is a little bit annoying. So we can avoid that, so that it will only open the same window instead of like opening the new tab every time. So for that, what we can do is, let's stop it and go to mock tool, click here, and in command line argument before port, what we can do is we can pass this argument, and that argument is called no launch window and space. So this basically saying that, okay, I don't launch any new window, use the existing one, right? So it will basically will not open you the new window. So once that's done, let's, now in this case, now it will not, as I mentioned, it will not launch, so it's not opening. So let's close, and just use this one, and let's refresh. So it's working over here, right? So again, if we stop and run, it will not launch the like the new window. We can still use the same window, so we can just need to just refresh, and then here in S3 then even don't need to select the request, because basically it's requiring the function input. So I've already created a sample. As you can see in the previous, I just providing one function input as a record with a bucket name, that one, and file name Sanz. So when you execute, press F10, something with S3 event. Over here the bucket name is Sanz, key is that file, right? So it will wait, that one, content hello, so that's the content, right? Next 5. And if you look at the log output, you'll see in the log. Now you can see, okay, this is the string file Sanz, and below is the content hello world. So locally we have successfully created a lambda function, tested, and all looks fine. And what next? The next step is to deploy this lambda function into AWS so that we can actually test this lambda function through AWS. So let's do it. For deployment, we'll be using the Visual Studio. So open the Visual Studio, and in the Visual Studio, if you right click the function, this project, and you'll see this published to AWS. So when you click this one, you will see AWS credentials. So it's using the same profile, my Ariana region, Asia Pacific Sydney, type zip, lambdafunction.net, RTW. So the main thing we need to do is giving the lambda function name. So you can give any name. So make sure that you give some nice name. So in our case, since this lambda function is lambda function talks is to read the data from S3 bucket. So maybe I'll say it's a file processor, and the handler will be the starting point. We will leave it as it is. You can also add some description like this lambda function is to read data from S3 bucket and write content into CloudWatch. But it's not mandatory, but it's always good that if you can provide some description. And the framework is .NET system. Now we need to select the role. So this is very important. So here in the role, I do have some existing role and I can choose the new one. So for this one, I'll choose the new one. So there are lots of lambda role, but for my case, what I will choose is this one, AWS Lambda execute. Is it because you can see with this AWS Lambda execute, it will provide would get access to S3 since we need S3 access, and we also need CloudWatch log. So I'll choose this one, and then we will leave the other option as it is and upload. And this will then upload our deploy our lambda function in the AWS. So let's wait for a few minutes. Okay, so deployment has now completed. So here also you can do some testing. So you can choose the S3 put from here, or since I have copied this JSON data, so you can just copy paste this one. So now it will actually test with your real lambda. So when you now before you test, maybe you can check if we have actually uploaded the lambda function or not. So let's go to lambda function, and you can see the file processor with the description. This lambda function is created. Yes, so we now have this lambda function created. So if we go to Visual Studio, from here what you can do is if you now invoke, this will actually trigger your lambda function. See, you can see even the log output, the file, and the hello world, right? So if you go to here, if you go to monitor tab, and if you click view CloudWatch logs, over here you can see there is a log created, and over here you can see, okay, this is the S3 file Sanz, and below its content hello world. Cool, right? So basically we have now deployed the Lambda function. And the next thing we need to do is we need to add the trigger so that whenever any file is uploaded, it will trigger the file processor, and we don't need to do while in this the tool. So for that, what we need to do is first add trigger, and in our case, the trigger will be the S3 bucket. So it is S3 bucket with the name this one, and maybe we will use all object query for this case. And we can also use prefix and suffix. Prefix in case in S3 bucket, maybe if we have some colors like, okay, I want to trigger this only for a specific color within this S3 bucket, or if you want to trigger for a specific file like, okay, txt, jpeg or something. But in our case, we will ignore that option. We'll just take this one and add. And now this will create a trigger. And if you scroll down over here, you can see it's also over here. So this lambda function is now attached with this S3 trigger. And the another important thing over here is the permission. So you notice that when we deploy, we choose the permission where we have, like permission for this lambda function for CloudWatch and Amazon S3, right? So when you do that, you can see in the resource summary, it's so that this lambda execution file processor role has access to CloudWatch and S3. That is why, uh, you were able to write in the CloudWatch at the same time this lambda function was able to access the S3. In your case, like if you do not set this role properly, you may be having some issue. Like you may be having issue with reading the file from S3 bucket, or maybe writing it to the CloudWatch. So make sure that you set up the permission correctly. And also the next thing important, that my Ariana, when I create this profile, this profile has an administrator access, which means it has a full access. So in your case, make sure your profile at least has enough permission to like access the S3 bucket and CloudWatch. Otherwise, you may have some issues. Anyways, now since we have this everything set up, let's do another test. So let's go to S3 bucket again, and let's try to upload any new file. So go to S3 bucket and let's upload, and this time let's upload this file. And if you look at this file, it has some content like my name is Ariana, right? So if you upload this file over here, and if you click upload, this has now uploaded this file, Ariana. So when you go to the CloudWatch log, and if you refresh, go back to that's now create this new one. If you check the new log, you will see this is S35 Ariana and my name is Ariana. See now every time when you upload any new file, this lambda function will pick up that like a file, and it will process it, and it will do whatever it has to do. You can even write in the log. So in our case, it is just reading the file name and writing its content. So basically the lambda function is doing what it is supposed to do. And the most important thing is, if you look down here, you'll see it's giving you the detail like, okay, this lambda function is run for 2232.78 milliseconds. So that's the millisecond, the build duration, and the memory size 256, and maximum memory use is like 90 MB. So in this case, it's a quick one, so it's not taking up too much time. But there can be a case when you are writing the lambda function, it may take more than a minute. Then you can always make a change. You can increase the value over here in the code. You can see this function time. By default we are using 30 seconds, but we can increase that to more than 30 seconds. But we need to keep that in mind that that lambda function timeout is maximum value that we can use is 15 minutes, which is 900. So if your lambda take more than a 15 minutes, then you will have an issue, which will be like timeout issue. So make sure that when you create a lambda function, it is not taking more than 15 minutes. If it does, then maybe you need to break down your application into multiple lambda. So that is another important thing that you need to consider. And also, if it will require more memory size, you can also increase that from 256 to 500, 12 or higher, depending upon your application need. And you can also change this thing in the lambda in the AWS. So if you go to the AWS and go to lambda, and if you go to the configuration here, in general configuration, you'll see the timeout value is 30 seconds. Yes, you can edit it and you can change that value. But as I mentioned, the maximum time is 15 minutes. So make sure that you don't uh, use the lambda function which will take more than a 15 minutes. And same with the memory, you can increase based on your application need. And that's it for today. I hope you learned something today. And if you like this video, please like my video, and please don't forget to subscribe my channel. And one thing, once you have finished with the lambda function, the another thing maybe important is writing the unit test for the lambda function. And if you are not aware of the unit test, then I have created another video regarding the unit test. I will put the link in the description. You can go and check it out, and it will give you some basic idea about writing the unit test. And I will see you soon in my next video. Thank you so much for your time. Bye.